All right. This took a bit to get around to, but we're finally here. A little while ago in December, the House of Representatives introduced House Resolution 1449, quote, condemning the global rise of antisemitism and calling upon countries and international bodies to counter antisemitism. We have no clue where it's at in the legal process now. We know it's past the House of Representatives and onto the Senate, but frankly, the content of the resolution is so openly fascistic that we would be surprised that if it went anywhere other than that. And we're here to tell you precisely how it is openly fascistic. Like many government documentations, the resolution is comically worded to imply and state one set of rules and regulations while allowing lawmakers the temporal freedom to skirt around the stated set of rules and regulations freely if desired. It's going to build some groundwork that HR 1449 happens to stand on, and then denote point by point how HR 1449 actually is not standing on any of those grounds and happens to be a completely something else. If ground is to be rendered, the first thing we have to encounter, no way around it, is anti-Semitism. For those who live under rocks, or those who hold bigoted beliefs, or those who just need to review their vocabulary terms, anti-Semitism, which is a real thing, mind you, manifests as a hatred towards Jewish people and or their beliefs that they hold, the customs that they engage with, or any set of practices that have come to be associated with the Jewish people. Wikipedia says, and we agree, that anti-Semitism is a kind of racial discrimination, although this can be interpreted upon the basis of gender discrimination too. It's just they're both the same kind of fake class divider, where one perceived group that shares a certain set of traits or characteristics is deemed inferior for possessing those traits and characteristics, and in turn lessen the perceived cultural value of these traits in comparison to other distinctive groups, and engendering a notion that these characteristic traits are parasitic and actively harmful to other distinctive groups. If you think that Jewish peoples are inferior simply because they don't follow Christianity, or think they all look ugly or something, or believe that they are inherently not people due to their belief, that would be pretty anti-Semitic of you to offer some example. So surely, House Resolution 1449 offers some inclusive definition of anti-Semitism, since it says in the title that's what we're trying to curb and condemn, and evoked in the text of the resolution about 17 times, right? Oh, damn it, we keep answering wrong. For as much as the resolution claims the purpose, there's no actual specific pinpointable definitions or examples of anti-Semitism, you know, the thing that we're trying to condemn and counter. So what is the bill trying to do instead? Because there are no definitions listed in the resolution itself, however, it does make allusions to definitions. So let's explore those, shall we? First, gotta pour one out to the U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. It's an old Biden-era policy that doesn't exist anymore. Well, at least the web page on the White House website for it doesn't exist anymore. Already off to a good start here. Full disclosure, we're not really delving too deep into this one since the new administration has it axed and whatever. It's just differently worded, same bull snart anyway. This is a document with a definition. We wish we could say that all of them did. The one on offer is, quote, anti-Semitism is a stereotypical and negative perception of Jews, which can be expressed as a hatred towards Jews. It is prejudice, bias, hostility, discrimination, or violence against Jews for being Jews, or Jewish institutions or property for being Jewish or perceived as Jewish. Anti-Semitism can manifest as a form of racial, religious, national origin, and or ethnic discrimination, bias, or hatred, or a combination thereof. However, anti-Semitism is not simply a form of prejudice or hate. It is also a pernicious theory that often features myths about Jewish power and control, end quote. You're going to notice how Biden copied his homework in like a little bit, just like a little bit. Also, just saying, this exists just because the U.S. is Israel's sugar daddy. You'll never see this kind of comprehensive legislation talking about the need to properly teach about the evils of slavery and land dispossession and its history in this country, just saying. Many of our criticisms of hr1449 are going to be applicable to this document too. They mention in hr1449 the 2004 Berlin Declaration and how that condemned anti-Semitism, wherein the Berlin Declaration actually provides multiple examples of what anti-Semitism is, so it can be delineated what specifically the Declaration tries to combat, being, quote, concerned in particular that this hostility towards Jews as individuals or collectively on a racial, social, and or religious grounds has manifested itself in verbal and physical attacks and in the desecration of synagogues and cemeteries, and all other acts of intolerance, incitement, harassment, or violence against persons or communities based on ethnic origin or religious belief wherever they occur, and also condemn all attacks motivated by anti-Semitism, by any other forms of religious or racial hatred or intolerance, including attacks against synagogues and other religious places, sites, and shrines. Makes sense how all of these can be anti-Semitic actions. They also mention in hr1449 the working definition of anti-Semitism that was drafted by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which is stated as, quote, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as a hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. We have some issues to raise before we go any further, specifically with how the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance and Joseph Robinette Biden chooses to define anti-Semitism. Extending anti-Semitic actions to property can mean many things. Like the Berlin Declaration previously stated, defacing grave sites and synagogues, that's anti-Semitic as heck. Both of these things are a kind of property, but like Israel-occupied Palestine is also a kind of property, and defacing Palestine, especially when it's done at the behest of the Israeli government, is very much not anti-Semitic. However, it is an egregious violation of human rights and multiple humanitarian treaties and super-duper war crimes, actual Nazi stuff. And according to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, we just did an anti-Semitism. because they also provide helpful little examples to better help define what anti-Semitism is. And one of them is, quote, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. When direct observable reality tells us that the state of Israel is doing actual Nazi stuff, like systemically killing off a group of people based on racial grounds or religious beliefs, a belief like, let's say, the Palestinian peoples are less than human and need to be eradicated because they are parasitic and actively harmful. Where have we heard this before? Maybe arguably even worse than Nazi stuff. That isn't anti-Semitism at this point. This is a genuine concern and critique of government policy. So far, the first definition of anti-Semitism was like an actual definition. The second one hasn't been fairly sound. The third definition actively confuses criticizing government in a meaningful capacity to be an anti-Semitic action. Let's return to the document that mentions defining anti-Semitism, which much of House Resolution 1449 is built off of. We're introducing the Global Guidelines to Countering Anti-Semitism. It's a 2024 document drafted by the United States government and adopted in Buenos Aires, Argentina. It's really important that you know this was adopted in Buenos Aires, Argentina. This was the place this document was founded in. Of course, without mentioning the US government drafted it, simply that it was just adopted by United States and partners. Oh gosh, the governmental presentation of the United States is polyamorous? Ew, she gives us a bad look. Stop it. The guidelines has a specific section about defining what anti-Semitism is, but within that section, labeled Understand and Define, there is offered no definitions for what anti-Semitism is, only another reference only to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition, which we've already established is a faulty definition. It's also very important, ultimately important, to note that the reference made to the definition does not include the definition, nor does the document stipulate that it will even follow the definition by the alliance, just that it is, quote, is an important internationally recognized instrument used by over 40 UN member states since its adoption in 2016. House Resolution 1449 also similarly avoids any subscriptions to certain definitions, just claiming that the definitions drafted in these other documents exist as, quote, important internationally recognized tools to increase understanding of anti-Semitism. So as we start to get into the content of HR 1449, the global guidelines by proxy, since a lot of what HR 1449 is predicated on is built off of that document, we all got to go into it with the knowledge that the resolution meant to combat anti-Semitism does not even provide a definition for what anti-Semitism is, and is actively avoiding the notion that it will even follow a definition of anti-Semitism. Extremely worrying if the whole purpose of these documents is to counter the whole anti-Semitism thing. So, who do these documents concern with the actions of anti-Semitism? Who can experience anti-Semitism and how? The first listed in HR 1449 is the State of Israel, which kind of makes sense. But if this is about countering anti-Semitism in general, why wouldn't you put the listed second Jewish communities first. Also, why must they mention that this and these targeted groups are targeted specifically by Hamas, invoking the actions of October 7th? Like, we get it. The media news narrative of Hamas being the baby killing, hospital human shielding, Israel destroying / would turn the genocide around on Israel perception of Hamas. And we get how October 7th was a horrific loss of life that should not be justified in any context, but clearly the context was there to make that situation happen. And however anti-Semitism is involved and weaves through the events of October 7th, anti-Semitic driving action is certainly not its cause. It's resistance against genocidal action. However, there is no denying that the aftermath of the attack could leave Jewish people more vulnerable to anti-Semitic action. All to say that these are specifically denoted targets, but there are additionally certain mentioned implied targets as to how the state of Israel and Jewish communities exist throughout the world, being whole of society, governments, international bodies, whole of government and society, states, to name the most named. And then relevant stakeholders. Alarm. What does this mean? Because, sure, an average Jewish person does hold stake in how anti-Semitism plays out, but also by the comically allowing wordage of the resolution and the guidelines could also very well additionally mean Maersk and Raytheon hold stakes in the sales of weapons to Israel, which very well could mean if anyone criticizes said action of sales or the state of Israel's initiation of those sales or Raytheon or Maersk's involvement in these sales, could be an anti-Semitism. So Maersk and Raytheon do additionally have a stake in how anti-Semitism plays out. So later on, if any body decides that they hold a stake in anti-Semitism, all they have to do is play along to attached political narratives. And if our government or the Israeli government decides in anything is anti-Semitic, the logical endpoint is that anyone can market or push any cultural narrative they want on the grounds of anti-Semitism, and governing bodies will vouch for those narratives as the correct ones, which means enforceable ones. Decidedly uncool. This mode of action is somewhat confirmed to us within the engage social media portion of the global guidelines, where, quote, relevant stakeholders are encouraged to increase transparency about anti-Semitic content, which might as well mean cease and desist a student protester's blog, or suspending the accounts of anyone who says that ethnic cleansing is not a valid form of self-defense, which could lead into another section of the global guidelines, avoid politicization, which is crazy, by the way, how anti-Semitism... Yeah, it's crazy. Anti-Semitism is never not going to be a political issue as long as Jewish people are governed, but we digress. If we can label anything as an anti-Semitism, we can use political excuses to label something as an anti-Semitic thing, then use religious excuses to denounce those same things politically. If anti-Semitism should, quote, should be rejected without political bias, and regardless of its origin, then you don't have to regard the origin of the anti-Semitism when you denounce it. So when there's additionally a whole section about protecting Jewish communities, we can't help but to be extremely skeptical about what the US government would consider a Jewish community and what it means to protect them. Most likely, the only meaningful protections Jewish communities will ever see from our government is if it also aligns with some sort of protection of capital, profit, or meaningful asset. Just our read. And when the global guidelines talk about the uniform collection of data documenting incidents of anti-Semitism as well as the perception of anti-Semitism along Jewish communities and the broader public, this basically reads to us as like Patriot Act 2, but specifically targeting whatever anyone in the government deems anti-Semitic, which we've already established could be anything from the non-definitions on offer. Okay, that's it. This resolution and its supporting documents it relies on clearly centers the preservation of capital interests first and foremost, and goes about centering those capital interests extremely poorly in the sense that many human decencies are thrown to the wayside in order to serve anything other than the communities that it all aims to protect. That's it. The government loves writing things in a way that retains the appearance of helpfulness, but allows the freedom to infringe on the rights of the governed. All of us, and that means everyone up here, even the contrarian ones, we all agree on this, refuse to sit idly by while the state of Israel is actively repeating the blood-soaked history of the colonial United States. Manifest Destiny was so 500 years ago. It was trite even when it was happening. And now that it's happening all over again, all we gotta say is, after a year and change of mask-off, serious, deliberate ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, Israeli military has violated the recent ceasefire deal to like double or triple digits. Set up a line of bricks on your local highway. Hug someone close to you. Give a free meal away. That's it. You don't have to listen to us anymore.